All right. Well, good evening to those of you that have joined us. I'm Angela Barlow, Dean of the Graduate School, and I have Mackenzie Taylor with me today. And we are really excited to talk to you about the 3MT competition. And so my part of this, I'm going to start off with giving you sort of an overview of what 3MT involves and some of the expectations, but kind of from a global thing, thinking about it kind of big picture. And then I'll hand it off to Mackenzie and he'll talk through some of the more nuts and bolts of doing a 3MT. So to get started, let me find my arrow keys. Where are they? Ah, there we are. Okay. So in terms of what is 3MT, so 3MT stands for 3-minute thesis, and it's a competition that started at the University of Queensland in Australia. And we're going to see some videos of a couple of folks that have participated and won in the 3MT competition. And you'll notice they have an accent. But it has quickly spread across the world and definitely across the US. And I was very fortunate a couple of years ago to go to a conference, and at this particular conference they had a 3MT competition, and they had students from all over the Southeast, lots of different universities represented, and it was a really cool event. I went again last year and saw it and came back even more excited about it, and so we decided that this would be our first year to launch it. And of course a pandemic came, and so it's going to be a little bit different this year because it'll be virtual, but that's okay. It's a step in the right direction for us. And so I'm super excited that you all are thinking about participating in our competition. Primarily it's 3 minutes, right? So you talk about your work for 3 minutes. The first question you might be wondering is why compete? And so for this, we're going to hear this short clip. It's less than 2 minutes of a previous winner, and hopefully you'll be able to hear this. Mackenzie, give me a thumbs down if you're not able to hear her talking, okay?
I was very fortunate to be titled the UQ 2014 3-minute thesis winner, which was an amazing experience. The opportunities that arise from doing the 3-minute thesis are something I could not even have imagined. So firstly, publicising the research was a really big point. Other collaborators heard what I was doing through the 3-minute thesis, and they've approached us to work with us in the future. Another reason why you should participate in the 3-minute thesis, I think, is really publicising yourself as a researcher. Having, the 3-minute thesis on your CV is, priceless, I think, and it's been very beneficial in my job opportunities that have arisen. The prize money was also very generous. From the 3-minute thesis, like I said, there has been so many opportunities which have come my way. Fulfilling my teenage dream of being in the Cosmopolitan magazine, that was a memory which directly stemmed from the 3-minute thesis that I'll never forget. Another benefit which came about from the 3-minute thesis was getting some consultancy work with Boeing Australia. Some funders actually approached us after and had a meeting with us to discuss potential opportunities where they could financially help out with our second phase study of our research. And then of course the indirect benefits, so had a whole lot of different media interviews stemming from that, as well as the opportunity to write media articles for things like Medibank magazine, which is an area I really enjoy.
So you heard from a winner, and the way this works is we have a competition at our university, and the winner from UCA would get to go to compete in a regional competition, and then the winner from that competition goes on to the next level. And so this is someone who won at the big level, in her country. But some of the things that she pointed out in terms of why compete, this is a really great opportunity to put something on your curriculum vitae that not everyone has the opportunity to do this, and so that is a nice way to enhance your curriculum vitae. Of course, the experience of promoting the work that you're doing, the research that you've done can lead to other opportunities. In addition, the experience itself gives you the opportunity to gain some skill sets in terms of explaining your research to a non-scientific audience or non-technical audience. And so with that, you gain some skills that are going to go a long way as you move forward in your professional career. So we thought we would start by taking a look at just a couple of examples. And we're going to watch 2 examples, and we'll pause in between so that you can think a little bit. But the key idea here is I want you to be thinking about what makes this a strong example, or what makes this a weak example. And we'll use the chat features after the second video to share some of our thoughts. So this is an actual 3MT performance, so it'll last less than 3 minutes.
Imagine you're a student, it's late at night, and you have an exam the next morning. You want to keep studying, but you're exhausted. You have a decision to make. Do you stay up all night to cram, or do you admit defeat and go to bed? What would you choose? Often in this scenario, we might sacrifice sleep and reach for coffee or chocolate to power through. But what if there's an alternative? What if I told you the best thing you could do was swap that caffeine for a good night's sleep? Research shows that sleep can help us to consolidate new memories. In fact, sleep may play a critical role in transferring memories from short-term storage in our brain's hippocampus into more stable long-term storage within the neocortex. The problem is, not all new memories seem to rely on sleep. And we're still in the dark about the role of sleep in learning new words. There is a need to identify methods to improve word learning, not only for students studying exam terminology, but also for the 1 million Australians living with a communication disorder. For some, it begins with a stroke. For others, it might be a lifelong disability. But regardless of the cause, difficulties with language can have a significant impact on a person's quality of life. So, to sleep or not to sleep after word learning? That is my PhD question. In phase 1 of my research, I recruited 75 healthy young adults who participated in 2 testing sessions. At the first session, the participants learnt an artificial language with nonsense words such as bleg or sports, so I could be sure the participants had never been exposed to the words before. The participants then returned 12 hours later to be retested on how well they remembered those new words. To answer my research question, I'd randomly assign half of the participants to a sleep group, where they went home to sleep overnight between the sessions, and the other half to a wake group, where they stayed awake during the day between the sessions. To account for testing the groups at different times of the day, I monitored participant levels of alertness, caffeine intake, and they also wore an activity monitor to measure their sleep duration. Although both groups demonstrated similar learning at their first session, when they came back 12 hours later, the group who slept remembered significantly more words than the group that stayed awake. So it's true, you should snooze or you lose. Now I'm conducting this same research with older adults to find out whether sleep can improve memory later in life. From there, my research has the potential to benefit people outside of the lab and may open up new ways to help populations with language difficulties simply by harnessing the power of sleep. So next time you need to learn something new, just sleep on it.
Okay, so I want you to just take a moment to think about what are some of the things that you noticed in that particular presentation. And so now that you're thinking about some of the things that are standing out to you about that one, we're going to watch another one, and that'll give us something to compare and contrast with these 2 3MT presentations. So here's the second one.
The stereotype of the starving artist is dead as the internet grows and creates new ways for creative professionals to make money off of their ambitions. Through websites like Patreon and GoFundMe, individuals need only find an audience willing to fund their ambitions in order to make money off of it. This can range from raising money for a series of projects to funding an entire online business. It also shines a new light on the publishing industry, specifically the self-publishing industry. This access to public funding, combined with the ever-growing digital age and decline in print, will lead to a new age of patronage where individual writers need not worry over query letters, portions of their royalties being taken away, or gatekeeping caused by the big publishing companies. There's a significant rise in the number of writers making names of themselves through publicly funded self-publishing projects. This is because as their funds rise, so does their audience. The one thing self-published writers often fell short on before access to crowdfunding websites. What I noticed as a result of this is the emergence of a new publication model that will provide more opportunity for individuals whose voice is often silenced before they ever get a chance to speak. I've drawn up steps that illustrate this new model and the potential effects it will have on the emerging writers in the publishing industry, as well as the diverse voices that are often silenced. Without Penguin Random House, HarperCollins, and Simon & Schuster gatekeeping emerging writers, the selection you browse at Barnes & Noble will likely become more diverse and include a wider range of writers, artists, and individuals who wanted to make their voice heard by a larger audience. With the writing landscape diversification, more room will be created for minority writers and emerging writers in classrooms, book clubs, and seminar discussions. This will also lead to further dismantling of the literary canon, which will further the representation of these writers in literature of the past, present, and the future. Thank you.
Okay. So now we've seen two contrasting examples. So what I'd like for you all to do is think about something that's standing out to you that you would say makes a strong 3MT presentation. So now that you can compare those two, what's something that makes for a good 3MT presentation? And I'd ask you to add that in the chat box. And Mackenzie, I can't see the chat box. And so you'll have to tell me if when we get some responses and what those are.
Sounds good.
So there's not a lot of y'all out there, so I need each one of you to go to the chat box and type something in that would indicate to you that this is something that makes it a strong 3MT presentation. We got anything, Mackenzie?
Yes, it looks like we do have one.
Okay, what's it say?
From Billy Huggins, they say the flow of the presentation as well as the presenter's interest in the project seems stronger in the first video.
Okay, so flow and then just, I would say enthusiasm, like the interest in the project. That's a good one. Do we have others?
Lucas Ratz says that proper and careful use of the one slide allowed seems small, but can take time away from already limited presentations.
Okay, so thinking about the role of the presentation slide, this is not quite the same as when you do like a poster session at a conference, so it's a little bit different. We have to think about that. Do we have anything else?
I believe that's it.
That's it? Okay, very nice. Well, when we looked at those two, you're going to see some of the things that you all were thinking about. One is paying attention to voice, and you're absolutely correct that enthusiasm goes a long way, as well as tone, right? And just being that tone allows your enthusiasm to come through, and so voice is definitely something to think about. Stage presence, making eye contact with people, and like I'm struggling with that right now because I keep looking around my screen, but I should be looking at the camera so that it's clear I'm looking at you. So things like that matter. But also wardrobe, right? And so thinking about how to present yourself professionally, because it goes a long way in your stage presence. And then also clarity and thinking about the research background that you're sharing and sharing it in a way that others can make sense of it, describing the impact and results, and like staying away from jargon. I know in that second presentation, there were a lot of words that I heard that I'm like, wow, I wonder if that means what I think it means because I'm not in that field. So clarity of presentation is definitely something that you would see contrasting in those two presentations. And of course, the PowerPoint slide itself, again, it's not like a poster. And so thinking about how to use it to enhance the presentation as opposed to a lot of clutter that gives you a lot of ideas related to the presentation. So those were things that came up to us, Mackenzie and I, as well as our GAs, Jose and Sydney, when we were thinking about contrasting those two presentations. So now that you have kind of an idea, a global idea of what 3MT involves, you've seen some examples, good and bad, and thought about why you might probably should do this, and I hope you will. I'm going to turn this over to Mackenzie, and he's going to talk through some of the more nuts and bolts of drafting your ideas for the 3MT. And before I turn it over, I will say that all of this information, we will send you the presentation in an email tomorrow, and we'll also share with you handouts that have different pieces of information. So right now, just kind of sit back and enjoy and think about the information that Mackenzie's sharing, and be ready to ask some questions when he finishes. All right, Mackenzie.
So as Dr. Barlow suggested, at this point in the presentation, I would like to talk to you guys a little bit about actually drafting your presentation and some important factors that should be able to go into this. The first one is that you need to make sure that you're writing for your audience. And the first part of writing for your audience is knowing who your audience is. And for the most part in these 3MT presentations, your audience is not going to be individuals in the same field of study as you. So in regards to that, you want to make sure that you're avoiding jargon and academic specific language. If you noted in the second video, in the bad video, she used the term gatekeeping. And she is, in her field of study, has probably knowledge of what gatekeeping means. Other individuals in that field knows what it means. But for individuals like me as a historian, or Dr. Barlow as a math educator, it could mean something entirely different for our field of study. So you want to make sure that you're taking time to explain these academic concepts in the language that's used in your field. As I was suggesting, you want to explain concepts and people that are important to your research. If I started talking about the historical theories of James McPherson, you know, a lot of people would be lost. You need to explain these important figures in your field and what it means to your overall research. You want to make sure that you clearly highlight the outcomes of your research. You want to make sure that at the end of the presentation, people know what you're presenting about in the clearest manner possible. You want to imagine that you're explaining your research to a friend who has no prior concept of what you're doing, what your field of study is. So want it to be very clear and kind of the plain nuts and bolts of what you're doing. And finally, as we also said, you want to convey excitement and enthusiasm about your subject. If you're not going to display enthusiasm about it, facts are probably nobody else is. So you want to make sure that you do have good tone, show enthusiasm for it. And if you do that, you're going to have a video that looks a lot more like the first video than the second one. So also going into your drafting, you want to make sure that you're telling a story. You want to present your 3MT thesis or dissertation as a narrative. You want it to flow very evenly. Perhaps you could break it down into smaller sections that will digest better for the individual audience. So we talked about telling a story. You want to make sure that it flows. There is a narrative. There's a beginning and an end to your presentation. You want to make sure that you have an opener that really grabs the audience's attention. And going into telling a story, you want to make sure that your presentation has a clear outcome in mind. Again, know what the most important parts are about your research and make sure that you're conveying that in a very clear manner to your audience. You want to leave the audience with no doubt what you're doing, why it's important, and what you're really hoping to achieve with your presentation. Of course, as with any project, and whether it's a writing or a presentation like this, you want to get it done, and then you want to revise, revise, revise it. Proof your 3MT thesis presentation. Ask for feedback, not only from those individuals that are within your field, but find people who, again, have no concept of what you're doing and see if it's understandable to them. And if it is, then you're on the right track. You want to make sure your presentation clearly highlights, again, what your research is about and why it's important. So let's talk at this point about what not to do. The second video was a great example. There were a lot of things in there that you want to make sure that you don't do. Don't write this presentation like an academic paper. You don't want it to be dry throughout. You want it to be something that will, again, grab their interest and keep them pulled in for that 3 minutes, keep their attention. Refrain from jargon, we've already talked about this part, or needlessly complex words that are specific to your area of study. You can use humor in your presentation. We encourage that. You know, there's nothing to keep people engaged like a little humor, but you don't want to do it to the point to where it devalues your presentation, where all people are hearing are your jokes or whatever and not really getting any of the meat out of your presentation. And finally, you know, a big thing not to do, don't make your slide cluttered or hard to read. In the second video we saw, you know, it looked more like a poster board. That's not what we're going for. It's not like an academic poster board. You know, she had some small words on there that you couldn't hardly even see. That's not what we're going for. In fact, we're about to show you here in a second, but a lot of the poster boards, here's the slide, here's the examples, but a lot of these are all winning posters or slides in these 3MT thesis competitions. And if you'll see, 3 out of the 4 of these don't even have any words on them. It's just something to reach at and grab your attention. Again, it's not a poster, very few words, if any. Want to make sure that it's something that they visually stimulates them. So we've talked about the drafting, a little bit what not to do. You want to make sure that you revise as much as possible. So let's talk about the timeline as far as our 3MT thesis competition here at UCA. The PowerPoint slide, if this is something that you're interested in, make sure that you have your PowerPoint slide turned into the graduate school by Friday, November the 20th. So that's coming up mid next month. So make sure you have that on your calendar. Your video is actually due on January the 8th of next year. These are all dates that will be posted on the graduate school's website as well, so you can make sure you're staying informed. And then the actual competition is going to be held on January the 22nd of next year. Here we have some resources for you. That very first one is a handout that was made by the graduate school here at UCA. We'll make sure to disseminate that amongst you guys and put it on our website. So anybody who is interested in being in this competition will have access to that. It's just a more complete handout of what we've talked about here tonight, plus a little bit more information. The remainder of those links down there at the bottom are just aids, resources that you guys might find handy in the drafting of your presentation.